is Sam, and I've got some really fine folks up here, and so I'm just going to have them introduce themselves to you, and also so you guys tell them a bit about your background, and then personally, I think you can really find out a lot about a person by the type of music that they listen to, so not quite a hot dog question, but if you guys could go ahead and tell us your favorite bands, go ahead and get it started. I think mine is Led Zeppelin.
Wow. Did not see that one coming.
I'm full of surprises, as you'll find out.
And I'd almost rather have the hot dog question. So my name is Kristie Doak. I'm Senior Manager of Database Marketing at the PGA Tour. Been there for, now I feel really old too. Been there for like 21 years. Been doing email marketing for probably the past 15 years, I guess. So seen a lot of changes in my time there. Favorite bands. Favorite music overall? I mean, I just recently got married and my DJ's probably in therapy right now. Tony Bennett, Old Dominion, Mumford & Sons, Post Malone. I mean, it's all over. Actually, quick funny story, I almost thought about skipping my rehearsal dinner to go see Post Malone in concert, but it was frowned upon. I'll drive somewhere and catch him.
I'm Neil Gogate, manager of CRM across all brands at Mattel, across the U.S., as well as overseeing some of our international counterparts. Favorite bands, I know John will hate me if I don't say Guns N' Roses since I was wearing a shirt the other day. This was not planned at all, but... Mastodon.
Nice. I'm Christopher Kayser. I'm the marketing technology manager over at Vivid Seats. Basically, I'm in charge of vetting out different vendors, get the tech working, and man science all the data. So, favorite band would have to be Sabaton. They're a war historian band that plays power metal.
Wow, like I said, we got a really interesting group of people up here. So obviously with technological capabilities nowadays, we've been able to capture so much more data, and especially as we're moving towards this kind of one-to-one marketing personalization, especially when it comes to email, there's a lot of challenges. So I'd love it if you guys could speak to some of the biggest challenges that you see in vetting and collecting this data, especially with third parties, and making sure that it's reliable and, most importantly, legal.
Sure. So, trying to feed two different beasts right now, excuse me. One in growing our database, but one also in developing our personalization and giving our fans more of what they in particular want. Email marketing now falls under the fan engagement team, so it's kind of a two-headed monster a little bit. Our data comes in from a variety of sources, from our tournaments, from our website, from our e-commerce, like all over. So first of all, making sure that we are collecting it in a compliant manner is one of my main concerns. With growing the database, I've had some people, which I'm sure we all have, that have said, let's just go buy lists, that's easy. Spend money, build a database, we're good. But again, the compliancy becomes a very tough issue to deal with.
Yeah, I think for us, you know, our primary consumer is their children, you know, and so we can't market to children. So primarily we go about it by reaching out to parents and trying to collect child date of birth. A lot of what we are really moving forward with is trying to create a personalization strategy around child date of birth and taking parents through all the different brands that we have. So, you know, if you have a child who is starting to crawl, making sure that we're addressing them about what's the next stage from Fisher-Price, where you can start showing them things about walking or showing them certain products where it allows them to imagine or use, you know, tactile skills. From a compliance standpoint, it's obviously super, super important, I think, as Kristie mentioned. You know, I think we do a lot with various partners, and I think, you know, CCPA is a huge, huge beast. Mattel being a company that is in the great state of California, this has been on my radar for the past 2 years since AB 375 got passed. And I think it's something that we're we've been watching very closely. We got ready with GDPR, which we used to joke around in our office was our new 4-letter swear word because nobody wanted to talk about it. But it's something where compliance is very important. I think we have to do a lot of education with our brand partners to help them understand that we're not just going to go out and buy a list. We need to do it methodically. We need to do it strategically so that it makes sense. We're growing it in the right way, that we're adding quality as well as value.
Biggest challenge on my end is that we already have a pretty robust user profile system, but part of my task is to add new channels worth of data into that so that we can drive more interesting, more targeted, and more rec-based emails. So I've had to recently get website tracking up and get that data ingested, and so that was one of our biggest challenges of 2019.
So Neil, you touched on CCPA. I'd be interested to hear, Kristie, your thoughts. What are you guys doing at PGA to kind of get yourself ready for CCPA?
Well, really, we've strengthened our legal team in the specialty of data, data collection, data compliancy, starting back with Castle, actually, and then moving through GDPR, and now with CCPA. Unfortunately, right now, we think our best bet at this point is to silo our California records when necessary and go through and do a complete audit on them and then make sure we're good to go with them. In addition to our database that we hold, where we hold all the PII, we also have a data lake in-house that we anonymize the data and send it over there, but we're like, how does CCPA affect those records as well? Like if someone requests to be purged, we're gonna have to purge them out of the marketing database and also out of the data lake. We err more on the cautious side than, I don't wanna say than we need to, because I prefer they err on the cautious side on that part of it, but it's definitely a challenge for us and an interesting roadblock kind of thing, so we'll see.
Interesting you bring up your legal team. I don't know about you, but I don't think we're lawyers up here, right? So I'm kind of interested in hearing how your relationship with your legal team has changed through the years and how you specifically lean on them for implementing these things like CCPR and GDPR, CCPA, that kind of thing.
So I only started Vivid Seats 2 Octobers ago. So when I came in, the relationship with legal wasn't really built in some areas. So I've tried to strengthen that and loop them in for the contracts and then also reviewing our different promotions. So our promo and sales team, so when they're doing marketing emails, they'll vet it out and they'll go with legal and say, hey, here's what we want to do. But let's see what else we can do. But I've also found it effective to bring them in earlier when vetting out different vendors so that they can protect us from sharing our customers' data with non-compliance, that sort of stuff. Making sure that we're doing right by everyone.
I have a hate-love relationship with my legal team that has had many ups and downs. I hate that 95% of the time they're right, but I love that they're always willing to help me figure out a way to make sure that we're achieving what we need to do for the business. I think, to add to what Kristie was saying before, there's a lot of conversation right now around what CCPA means for the rest of the country, and I think there's a lot of discussion from a federal standpoint as well as from a state level. I think eventually it could go either way. I think there's a lot of states looking at how to really give consumers more control over their data, and I think the biggest concentration there that our legal team has really helped advise me on is with GDPR, we had to get ready to be able to allow consumers, especially obviously in Europe, to look at, be able to see the data that we have on them, allow us to, basically tell us, we want you to delete our information, we want you to be able to do this and that. And CCPA is an extension of that. I think the biggest thing that we're noticing, at least for our company, is that there is this added attribute around, I don't want my data to be sold. And that's the biggest caveat right now around CCPA, is making sure that, you know, we get that in place. We work with a lot of partners where privacy policies in the past have allowed them, and I'm not sure if anybody else is this way, but their privacy policies have allowed us to acquire consumers based on there being mutual interest. And so CCPA really does affect some of that, where we've had to go back to those partners to figure out, like, how can we make sure that if we are able to still collect this information, how do we do it in a way that still is safe and compliant?
So what's the process been like for you guys going back to some old historical data and maybe cleaning it, making sure that it still meets, you know, requirements and things? How has that affected you?
I know we had an incident probably like 8 to 10 years ago. We had very, very old data, and no one wanted to cut the fat kind of thing because we didn't want the database count down. But we ended up getting blacklisted, quite frankly. And our ESP and database warehouse provider was like, hey, let's start looking at some of these records. And we chopped down back then a lot. We cut our list probably in half or close to it. Now I think because we've gotten much tighter on our compliancy, and because I have a specialist that sits in our legal group that handles permissioning and strictly looks at data and does audits on it, I don't think it's going to be as hurtful. I think the CCPA is going to be our immediate challenge. But to just add on to what you said, like, I think different states are going to pick up different laws right now. And so I think CCPA is a little bit of the tip of the iceberg kind of thing. I think it's going to cause, you need to be thinking ahead. I know New York is looking right now. I mean, there's stuff that you got to be prepared for kind of thing. So I think Castle and GDPR kind of helped us prep a little bit, but it's going to be a challenge for sure.
Only thing I'd have to add is that from our side, thankfully, we have very targeted engagement groups. So we make sure that you're an active user for when we're marketing to you. So that has saved us on even needing to use older data. So we do have our IT and security people reviewing that with us and what we need to do with older records. But we're only marketing to our most engaged users anyway, or net new customers. So.
Yeah, and we're kind of doing the same thing. Just to add on to that, we're marketing to our active customers, but what we're also trying to do is those unengaged fans, we're trying to re-engage them. So we're trying to run campaigns over there to move them over to the active bucket.
And so with PGA and also with, you know, Vivid Seats, I think to a certain extent, a lot of the ways that you capture data are through some different channels, you know, events, things like that. So what are some ways that you have gone about making sure that data that you're collecting from these third parties in different channels, how are you going back with like matchback analysis and making sure that the data you're collecting is correct and reliable, but also that you're matching back certain data to correct customers and things like that?
So I inherited a very messy process from my predecessor, mad science that he was, but so part of my job was we had a vendor who was doing website tracking for us. But the data that we were getting was very messy. It came over in tons of files. And it would come in a few days late usually, which didn't make it all that useful to rapid marketing. So I vetted out in March and April, and then May, another vendor, shout out to LiveClicker for the amazing work that they do. They did a custom project for us. And using Google Tag Manager, we're able to send them a hashed email address. So they're not actually recording any sort of like PII or anything like that, but they send me a file the next morning at about 1 a.m. with all the activity that was on our website, both device cookie-based and then with, if they have logged in, then with a user ID that's that hashed email address. It's then my job to vet out that data, and I've created in Salesforce a 15 SQL automation that runs through it. It tries to backfill people based on if you're a previous purchaser, so we're tracking anonymous activity, then we're grabbing all of your interest data from what you've browsed on our website, And that allows us to build much more robust interest profiles. And what I had to do vetting-wise is just what's coming over, what do I need from this? And I'm happy to say the live clicker data feed is amazingly clean. I have to do very little processing on it to clean it up, almost none, and then I get to parse through and find all the useful nuggets. In general, Vivid Seats is also using that hash version of email address to communicate with some of our other vendors or to intake data from other teams. And this allows us to have a pretty secure way to connect data from different teams.
Yeah, and I think for us, there's really, I don't truly have a ton of third-party data. I have a variety of sources, but my tournaments, my sponsors at various tournaments, my product team, like the agreements that we have with them have all covered this. We've learned from past mistakes, but it's also, it's still going over every time and making sure that the compliancy is there in the agreement kind of thing, that we are good to go. We know most of our tournaments go through Ticketmaster, sorry. But, you know, we have an agreement with Ticketmaster. So when we get those ticket purchasers in, we are already able to communicate with them kind of thing.
Come to us.
Did you hear that?
So, Neil, I really think that your whole situation with, you know, trying to market to kids without marketing to children is very interesting. And I know having a lot of different brands underneath, like the Mattel umbrella, have you run into like any, you know, challenges when you're trying to make sure that, you know, across brands under the umbrella that people are using data in the same way and sharing the data in a correct way without any silos?
How long do we have? I think one of the challenges we have is that we have so many brands underneath us. If you're not familiar with the name Mattel, we have Barbie, Hot Wheels, Thomas and Friends, Fisher-Price, American Girl. I could keep going on and on.
Basically, Neil's Santa.
Yeah, a lot of times. One of the challenges we have is that our brand marketers want their message to be sent out all the time. And so this is our big season right now. You know, it's holiday season. This is when everyone's buying for holidays, buying for Christmas, buying, et cetera. And everybody says, oh, we have a new product. We want to send this out. Oh, we have a new product. We want to send this out. We can't send 12 emails a day, right? We could. Unsubscribe. You know, it wouldn't be any good. We've been working with our brands to get them to understand that, you know, there really is a way and an art to really messaging consumers. And I think that's been a big challenge that we've overcome this year, where in past years we were sending out maybe 3 or 4 emails a day for different brands, and a consumer might receive all 4 of them, which is not a great experience. What we've been working on is trying to figure out how we can get better with the data that we have, create the proper segmentation that we can look at a consumer that has a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old and be able to make some appropriate decisions based on web behavior, based on past purchases, based on other things that they've done, so that we can use content blocks to include, might be an offer for Barbie, might be an offer for Fisher-Price in the same message rather than it being divergent. I think as it relates to, you know, some of the future state conversations that we're having with them, it's really trying to get our brands to understand that we all work for a bigger company, and we're trying to make this a fluid life cycle journey where somebody comes in with Fisher-Price, they can get moved into Barbie, moved into Hot Wheels, moved into this, that, and the other.
So I'm going to ask you guys, you know, kind of thinking about one of the panels yesterday. I'm going to call them learning moments. Have there been any specific kind of, oh crap, learning moments that you've had in regards to, you know, using data, collecting data, and keeping it clean, that kind of changed the way that you do things that you can think about?
I had one this morning.
Oh, do tell.
Yeah, so this is fresh. We had an email that was supposed to go out promoting American Girl to our Fisher-Price consumers. And when we looked, originally earlier in the week, it was supposed to go out to about 500,000 consumers. And then we have a process where it gets fed in. We use Adobe Campaign as our ESP. We have a process where that gets fed in from our database into Adobe. When my team looked at it last night, we only saw 150,000. And so it's like, okay, we're missing 350,000 consumers. That's not a small amount. And so there's been a lot of fire drills happening overnight. We're working on it. So again, I think this is a conversation where we need to better engage with our IT partners, and our IT partners need to better understand what we're trying to do from a business standpoint. It's always been this, I like to call it like the same like the wall that they had in Game of Thrones, that like we need like a fire-breathing dragon just to like come and torch it, because right now IT sits on one side, the business sits on other. They both operate in completely different ways. It can't be that way going forward, though.
From my side, so we use Salesforce Marketing Cloud, and we've been on there for now 2-3 years. And so we've got automations that have been running just fine for years, and then they will fail. And so it's part of my job to go in and vet out why. And I'm noticing a lot of SQLs that were built to intake 2 or 3 data sources, and then over time we added a 4th one, and then a 5th one, and then a 6th one. And so part of my job over the summer was breaking down those SQLs and cleaning up how we were joining all that data, getting it back together, so that we only had a few connection points that we could intake, 10, 20 different data sources and do so cleanly and efficiently.
I've had the mistake that was said yesterday of like not quite reading the date as the correct date or the time for deployment as the right time. We send out what we call a connect email for certain tournaments, which kind of gives you all the various ways you can ingest that tournament coverage. But we send that out to our full file, which is large, and it takes a while to throttle through all those emails. So the first time I sent one, I just really didn't think it all the way through, set the deployment time. It went out, luckily, to the full list. I didn't have that issue. But there were people that were receiving it after coverage was off air, after our OTT product was off air, some of them being my coworkers and higher-ups who were like, hey, it makes no sense to get this message now. My quick shuffle was, well, you're well-informed for tomorrow. But timing-wise, it's thinking about how to make it work best and maybe how to break down segments and deliver them at different times kind of thing.
Well, I guess just kind of to wrap some things up here, if there was, one piece of advice that you could give to the fellow marketers in the room here about how you collect data and moving forward with the changes that we're seeing in legislator, kind of what would that be in a general sense?
Build your relationship with legal. It's not the easiest thing to do, but as I said before, when Castle came about, it forced my legal team. They've always been supportive, but they didn't have a specialist, and it kind of made the step of, let's get a specialist in here that can deal with data compliancy, and that's been a huge help, not only from that aspect, but from me working with individuals who say, let's go buy a list. When I say, I wouldn't recommend that, that's not really the way we do things, but you're higher up than me. Well, now I have a backup to say, hey guys, if we're doing this, we've got to make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's kind of thing.
I would agree, and I think just to add to that, I would include your IT organization into that same conversation. I think given that we're talking about CCPA, which is something for the U.S., there's a lot more happening. Our company, we obviously operate globally. There's other laws that are going to be coming into place for the rest of the world too. So I would say get ahead of them, at least start looking into it. Think about what is a good lowest common denominator, something to build out that would apply across, and where you can, you still need to do your job. So operate as efficiently as possible, but make sure you're keeping the data that you have safe.
Yeah, just going to add on is take the time to build out that relationship with legal, with security, with IT. Also, bribe your engineers, get them on your good side, get them to help vet this out, not just with your current setup, but if you're changing ESPs or vendors, get them to join a meeting, vet out what you're trying to do, make sure that it's compliant. I got really lucky over at Vivid Seats. We have a very technical focus. So I already had people that were pretty easy to explain. I'm like, this is important, we need to pay attention to, and I got lucky that we had people that would listen.
Excellent. Sam, thank you guys very much. We have time for questions. Back here. We'll get the mic. Hang on, we'll get the mic to you.
I'll meet you halfway. Anthony Chuli, Director of Product Marketing at 250 OK. I'm curious about, just down the line for the panel, it seems like on the heels of things like Cambridge Analytica and GDPR and CCPA that government is having to step in to try and regulate data privacy and concerns. Do you feel a moral obligation to kind of self-regulate your organizations and practice ethical marketing?
Absolutely. So over at Vivid Seats, thankfully, again, I don't really have to fight that because a lot of people are on the same page, but we do fight to keep our data ethical, how we're marketing to people ethical, and targeted. But we also make sure that we're not just selling your data willy-nilly. We're making sure that we keep it in-house. We're not, sending it to third-party vendors. Like for LiveClicker, we send them a hashed email address. That way, and to be fair, LiveClicker told us, please don't send us your email address in a raw format. So it's nice to work with a partner that has the ethics as well. But take that time to do that. Is hugely important from our end because we want to make sure that we're selling tickets to events that you want to go to and we're not trying to do anything else.
I think, the things you mentioned were huge wake-up calls for everybody. I think for us, we absolutely, primarily because the most important information that we have on our consumers is the child's date of birth. And so it's imperative that we keep our data as secure as possible. And we're not as sophisticated as of yet as what Chris is doing with Vivid Seats, but we are looking into ways that we can start extending first-party data into other platforms. So it's going to be incredibly important that we make sure we monitor it very closely.
Yeah, and we've always, like I said before, always erred on the side of caution kind of thing. Maybe I'm a tad overcautious, but I look at it as it's not only the tour's name on the line, quite frankly, it's my name on the line, and I don't look good in stripes or jumpsuits. I don't want to go to jail. I don't have fines to pay, nothing. So, but we err on the side of caution. My data is actually stored off-site by my vendor under very strict, I've been there several times, I can't even get in the room where the servers are, I don't have clearance. But my data does not leave. If I have partners that come in and want to do like a scrub up against my list or whatever, they have to post their list to an FTP site. My data does not leave at all. And I just err on the side of caution as much as I possibly can.
Cheers.
Steve Moynihan with Jebit. Neil, to build on what you just said about first-party data, I'm right here. What are y'all doing? Obviously, GDPR, CCPA are making making the use of third-party data harder. So, from a first-party data perspective, what are you guys doing to kind of try and increase the amount of first-party data that you're collecting?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do a lot off of our website. We work with various co-write partners. Shout out to Flatiron Media. And we also are doing more from an experience standpoint. So a lot of our brands are starting to understand that our products can't just be the end-all be-all. We need to create these really great consumer experiences. For the children, but obviously parents are taking their children to these experiences. This year was Barbie's 60th birthday, and so we had a tour where we sponsored it and brought people to various Walmart parking lots, and it was a fully immersive experience where people could go and find out what career they could be. They could dress up as Barbie, they could interact in other ways. in the same way, we've been doing this for Hot Wheels and for Thomas and Friends for the last few years as well. And so I think it's incredibly important for us to continue building those experiences and allowing us to create new ways to organically capture new consumers through those events.
That's awesome.
We're going to continue this in the roundtable at the end of the morning. Sam, panel, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.